Enjoy the convenience of 7 days a week banking and extended hours with Cube from First Arkansas Bank and Trust. Member FDIC.
The Arkansas football team hopefully is trying to make the Alabama series a little bit more fun again. It hasn't been for about 15 years, at least if you're on the Arkansas side of things. Eli Gold has been on the Alabama side of things, calling it for the Crimson Tide. He is his own favorite despite all the losses in a row. Eli, welcome back. How are you today?
I am well. Good to be with you guys.
Eli, you probably heard this on past interviews. The perception of Alabama is, well, they're not quite Alabama like this year, but you look through the numbers and you look at the record and, well, the information doesn't support that perspective. How would you compare? It seems like I have the same question for you every year. How do you compare this Alabama team to past years? Everybody's trying to play to a standard, and Alabama's standard's just been a little bit different than everybody else's.
Well, it's interesting. No, this may not be as explosive an offense, for instance, as last year. It's explosive enough to be number 2 in America, but in years past, for instance, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, you throw a slant across the middle, they'll make the catch, and then they'll run for 70 yards. This year, you throw the slant across the middle, and the guy makes the catch, and he runs for 50 yards. We're splitting hairs, really. It's a different team. This is a young team to start with. It is a very young team. Granted, we're a lot of games into the season now, so those totally green youngsters who went into the season opener against Miami now have a good bit of experience under their belts, but it's still a young team. John Mechie is outstanding. I mean, Jamison Williams, how he gets away in the transfer portal from Ohio State remains, at least to me, one of the all-time great mysteries in life. But it's maybe not quite as explosive. Brian Robinson, a very good running back. Is he Najee Harris? Is he Sean Alexander? I don't know. But, the man's still putting up a ton of touchdowns. And you look at the quarterback again. We talked about Bryce Young being young. Well, he has got better statistics through this week of this first year, and I'm calling this his first year because, last year he played in a mop-up role late in the blowout games against, Western Carolina and stuff like that. I don't count that. I'm just talking about a full season. His numbers at this point are better than those of Jalen Hurts, better than those of Tua Tagovailoa, better than those of Mac Jones. Maybe he has a couple of yards fewer than those guys, but the numbers are still better than those guys. So, I guess if people want to nitpick, you can say that this might not be as explosive of a team. Defensively, it's still very, very good. And you got a guy who's a linebacker who's getting talk of a potential Heisman win. I don't know if that's going to happen or not for Will Anderson, but it's a good, solid football team. It really is.
I was trying to find a weakness, like a lot of probably coaches out there, and the only thing I could see on the stat sheet was maybe pass defense. Has it been down a little bit this year?
Well, there have been a few more longer passes completed against the Tide than in years past. Of course, over the last 5 years, the Bama secondary has restocked the National Football League. So, there's likely going to be a little bit of an adjustment, but still, it's a very, very good secondary. When you lose guys like Dylan Moses playing at linebacker and a few others, you're going to feel that, and it's taken a while. But I would still take Alabama's defense when they're healthy and playing at their fullest. I would take them against most anybody in America. I mean, Georgia's got a very, very special team this year. But, Alabama is right there behind them. I really do believe that, having watched every single down of every single game.
Eli Gold joining us on the Brandon Moving and Storage Hotline. If you're just tuning in and talking a little about Alabama and Arkansas, speaking of mysteries, I never thought I would see an Alabama offense held to 6 yards rushing, certainly not in a win. The LSU game was a little bit different, and we know the Tigers get up for that game every year, even under the difficult situation they're under with their coach. What did they do that you saw to be effective against Alabama's run game?
Well, I don't know if it's anything they did. The Tide just didn't block well. They didn't catch the ball well. So then you had to zero in on the running game, and LSU knew that, and they were able to tee off. The run numbers, yes, it was 6 rushing yards. Of course, you do have to look at the fact that Bryce Young was sacked a number of times, which was unusual. But he was sacked a number of times, and those numbers obviously come off your rushing total. So it really wasn't that Bama truly ran for 6 yards. They didn't run for a whole ton of them, but they didn't really run for 6. That's what their number was after you subtract the sack yardage and stuff like that. But it was just one of those games, It was just one of those games. Alabama played. They got the job done. But no, it was, you kind of knew when the game opened up and you had a couple of sure-handed guys dropping easy passes. I mean, that's what we saw at Texas A&M when the Tide was defeated by the Aggies, and we kind of all looked at each other in the booth. And, of course, we were on the air, but our eyes said to one another, uh-oh, we've seen this script before. But, the Tide was able to settle down and get the win. But it was as much what Alabama didn't do as much as what LSU did do, though LSU played well. I mean, you cannot take that from them. But I think if Bama had played to their highest capability, it would not quite have been 6 rushing yards and so on.
Eli, my Aggie buddy still can't tell me what happened and how they beat Alabama. Can you explain what happened that night?
Yeah, I mean, Alabama had won 20 games in a row, whatever. You got kids on the team who had never lost a ball game, let alone in Alabama. We got a couple of guys who had gone with one loss in 4 years in high school. Okay, so these guys had forgotten what losing was like, and the Tide just kind of went through the motions that night. They did not have a good week of practice leading up to the A&M game. You could tell when we had Nick Saban on. We host his radio show on Thursday nights, and leading up to the trip to College Station, he was very, very cautious as to, building Bama's game plan up because he knew it had not been a good week on the practice field. And then all of a sudden, guys start, it's like, you got Fred Biletnikoff out there and he can't hang on to the football. That's what it was. You have, guys like Jaleel Billingsley, an outstanding tight end. He couldn't hang on to the football. You got this one, that one. They're all wide open. They can't hang on to the football. And Jimbo has put together a heck of a football team. Let's not overlook that. They are a good football team. They were ranked highly before the season began. Then they struggled a little bit, and the heat was getting turned up on everybody, and they played maybe their best game of the year. But Bama again contributed, and with all of that said, Alabama had a chance to win with 2.5 minutes remaining in the ball game. So it was just one of those. You're not going to win every single game, unfortunately. It'd be nice if you could. And Nick Saban, used that as a learning thing. He says you can never let a failure go to waste. And it was a failure because the team lost, but I think it woke up a lot of guys, and that's when Will Anderson the next week stood up and said, fellas, look, we're not playing well. We can't keep going like that. We've got to play the way we're capable. And then not only did he say that as a sophomore, but then he went out and got 4 sacks in the next ball game. So, it happened. It was just one of those Saturdays.
Eli, it's really weird to hear a guy associated with Alabama say that you can't win every single game. I didn't even know that was a thought process over in that part of the country.
Well, it's not a thought process. It's just, unfortunately, a fact. I mean, I don't care who you think the greatest team is in sports is. I don't care what your sport, whether you say it's the Montreal Canadiens or the New York Yankees or the Braves or the Packers, or I don't care who it is, the Celtics or some soccer team. None of those teams are going to win every single game year after year after year. There's going to be a loss that sneaks in there, and that Saturday it was Alabama's day to lose.
Well, there was a period of time not so long ago in Arkansas football that we weren't sure if they were going to win a game again, and luckily they're on the right track under Sam Pittman, 7-3.
Sam's got him playing good ball. He really does. I like him. He's a good man.
What are your thoughts on the team generally?
I've been impressed. They really have. They have stepped up. They're playing good ball. They're not making mistakes. I've been impressed. I didn't know exactly what was going to happen, but I don't know Sam well. I think I've interviewed him one time, and that's about it. But, he's recruited some good ball players, and there just seems to be a winning feel around that program. And, you can't substitute that. You've got to have that winning atmosphere, that winning attitude. So I was telling somebody, I guess it was yesterday, I said, he has very quietly moved his team to, near the head of the table in the Southeastern Conference. So I think he's doing a magnificent job. And I don't say that because I'm on your show. I mean, it's obvious. He has done one of the better coaching jobs in the SEC, and I just love his approach and the way he, I don't see him much again. I see him in his press conferences and stuff like that. But I really like the approach he's taken, and it's obviously paying off on the field.
How about players? Any player that you've got your eye on, and Alabama's got their eye on to stop this weekend?
Well, I don't know. If I did know, I probably wouldn't tell you. But but no, you guys have a good ball club. I mean, Traylon is running the ball pretty well. Clearly, Sanders runs the ball well. Who's on your ball club and who's done well. I think one of the interesting things is going to be the tight end, and you may scoff at me saying that, but Blake has caught only he caught about 10 passes or so, but Alabama has had trouble handling big tight ends this year, last year, the year before that. He's 6'4". What's his name? Trey Knox. He's 6'5" or 6'6". That's been a problem spot for Alabama. They have given up more passes, to more tight ends than we've seen, and probably in anything else. When Bama plays a team with a big tight end, that's where they go. So that's something I'm interested in watching to see how, because these tight ends, as big as they are, they can get lost in the plays sometimes, and it really has been a problem for Alabama. So those are some of the guys I'm looking at watching and seeing, and obviously Jefferson's played well. He's doing well. He's throwing for 70%, 65, 70%. Only a couple, 3 interceptions against, nearly 20, you can correct me, but nearly 20 touchdowns now, with only a couple or 3 interceptions, so he's not making mistakes. So it's not going to be an easy ball game. I think Alabama's going to win. Don't get me wrong. I think the Tide is a better team, but I think that Coach Pittman has put together a very, very good ball club. And the other thing on the other side of the ball, Arkansas's defense has, not ranked all that well in America. Meanwhile, Alabama's offense, for instance, third in scoring, Alabama is. And I think the Hogs are 50th in America in scoring defense. Passing offense, Bama is second in the league and 11th in the country. And I think the Razorbacks are 25th in the nation defending against the pass. So I think there are some things when Bama's got the ball that'll work in their favor. But it's not going to be an easy ball game. None of them are in the SEC.
Eli Gold joining us on the Brandon Moving and Storage Hotline. One of the most debated players, and certainly quarterbacks going into the last draft, was Mac Jones, and all he's done is led his team in New England to 5 straight wins.
Right.
What were your thoughts on him? I mean, you spent time around him. I mean, did you see the makings of a big-time starter in the NFL immediately into his career?
It's funny you say that. I was talking with Coach Saban just the other day at a luncheon, and I said, did you see Mac being an immediate NFL starter? And Coach Saban said, well, I knew he was talented. He is. He's a great kid. Studies his brains out. I mean, he is always studying film, going over play. But I mean, he is in that regard, everything you'd want from a quarterback. But, would he have become the starter had Cam Newton still been there? I don't know. That was an interesting, element that I don't know if anybody had figured in when training camp began. But when Mac was there and before Cam, had to sit out for a while, he learned so much from him. I mean, Mac Jones is like a sponge. He sucks up everything he can about the job at hand. And then, of course, this past weekend we saw him throw 3 touchdown passes and so on. So, if you had told me a few years ago when the Alabama quarterback room was Jalen Hurts, Tua Tagovailoa, and Mac Jones, if you had told me that all 3 of those guys would be starting in the NFL, I might have doubted it because we just hadn't seen enough of Mac. But then Mac plays last year under tough circumstances with COVID, all this stuff, wins the national title, and when he gets, he reminds you of Kurt Warner in many regards. Here's a guy who's stocking the shelves at a grocery store in Iowa, playing with the Iowa Barnstormers of the Arena Football League, and he's happy to just hang out, and he wants more, but you didn't know if he'd ever get the opportunity for more. Next thing you know, he's played 10 years in the league, he's won Super Bowls, and so on. Well, that's Mac. He was patient, he waited, and when the opportunity presented itself, he has just gobbled it up.
We were fortunate to have Vern Lundquist in earlier this year at the Little Rock Touchdown Club. He had a lot of nice things to say about you during our visit. Obviously,
Vern's
that's been
a dear friend.
Yeah. I was just curious, just your thoughts on that relationship. And, we've talked in the past about guys you've sort of picked things from or, bounced things off of as far as the business. What's Vern meant to you in your career?
Well, Vern has just been an absolute dear friend. My career has probably been influenced by others, having grown up in New York City and listened to Marv Albert, and I am probably a closer personal friend to a few others. But Vern and I are dear, dear friends. We, he's like your grandfather, your uncle, whatever. He is a guy I can talk to about anything in this business, but let's face it, Vern is Vern. I mean, I'm never going to get to that level. He's been a network superstar for decades. That's not in my future. But he is always quick to share a thought. He is the funniest guy going. And when you sit down with Vern, he's one of these guys that even if you don't know him, you sit down with him and you're like lifelong buddies. You know what I mean? It's just, he is so quick to embrace anyone that he is talking to. And I just love his work. I mean, he, one word as a caption to a picture. I mean, I can't do that. I'm a radio guy. I talk way too much. But he can look at a picture and say one word or 2 words and make a spectacular caption to that picture. So he and Nancy, his wife, they're wonderful people. As a matter of fact, I was texting with them the other day. They have been in the Greek islands for the last 4 weeks, touring and having a good time. So, Vern is just a wonderful, wonderful man, and his work on golf has been outstanding, and he's a great storyteller, which I'm sure you found out when you had him in town there. So, yeah, I love him to death. He and I have, and of course, we don't look all that dissimilar. People, when he was in town for a CBS game, people would come up to him at the restaurant and say, Eli, how you doing? And he'd always say, no, I'm not Eli. The name's Lundquist. And they'd say, you're not Eli. I said, well, you should be. And they walk away because we don't look that dissimilar. So, but he's a dear, dear man. He really is.
Okay, last thing, we're going to have to let you go. You talked about talking too much. I think you talked just the right amount, and I hate to bring up a negative, but the A&M game, I want to go back to that quickly. Your call, we played it on the air. We won't play it again here just because of time constraints, but you let that field goal really breathe. Was that by design, or were you shocked at with the outcome of that game?
No, it was by design. I'm setting things up. Jimbo had called a timeout with a second to go, And I gave the particulars. Here's, such and such to attempt the field goal. It'll be from this distance. From this distance, the kicker is such and such this year. He's made whatever it is. And then I'm sitting there and I'm saying to myself, well, what else can I say? And I said, because we were in the other guy's building, so you knew there was going to be a reaction if he made it, and there'd be no reaction if he didn't make it. And I just said, and I'll let the crowd tell you what happens. I mean, I timed it so there wasn't an interminable wait. I said, we'll let the crowd tell you what happens. In about a second and a half, they snap the ball, he kicks it, and it's a touchdown. A field goal for the win. And this volcano of sound erupted. And, even though it was radio, everybody knew what had happened. And you know who did that to such an art form was Vin Scully. Whether he was on radio for the Dodgers or TV for the Dodgers, he let the picture and the sound speak. And my thinking is, when you're on the radio, you are not only bringing the game to the listener, but you are taking the listener and placing them inside the game, inside the stadium. So when you're there and you're watching it, there's this volcano of sound when the guy makes the kick. So I just said, don't say anything to myself. I said, don't say anything. And I just said, and the crowd will tell you what happens. And then the crowd obviously yelled and screamed like crazy. And about 10 seconds later, I jumped in and said, obviously the field goal was good and A&M wins it, and that's that. So, yeah, that was my thinking, because sometimes you got to realize that there's nothing you can say that is going to add to what the sound can say.
There you go. Free lesson for everybody out there who has aspirations of becoming a broadcaster on top of all the analysis. There you go. Eli, thank you, my friend. Have a good call this weekend.
Thank you. Great to be with you guys. Take it easy.